We're delighted that the Constitution Project is once again facilitating Smart on Crime. Smart on Crime is a document that has been created by over 30 expert individuals and organizations from around the country, all of whom support different kinds of criminal justice reforms on a variety of different issues. The history of Smart on Crime is that before the 2008 election, a lot of these same groups, about 22 at the time, decided that we were going to have a new president, we were going to have a new Congress, and that we wanted to try to educate them about some of the criminal justice reform issues that we'd all been working on for a very long time. And so we created this document. We called it Smart on Crime, and it includes discussions of problems and solutions and supporters and opponents, and background information on everything from the death penalty and indigent defense to recidivism, to reentry, to the drug problem, to mandatory minimums and other kinds of criminal sentencing, to the pardon power, you name it. There's probably something in Smart on Crime on that issue. And we decided this year we have a new leadership in the House of Representatives, a Republican leadership, and we have a lot of new members of Congress, and we thought we probably should update Smart on Crime. We should see if there were some other people who wanted to participate, and so now we're up to over 30 expert individuals and groups, all of whom have contributed to the various chapters, and we're just thrilled to be able to facilitate this and to release it, and I hope you'll listen with great interest and great care to the people who follow, because they are the experts and they will be able to tell you more about what these issues are all about and how we can bring our country to a much more rational criminal justice system.
Civil forfeiture is one of the most serious assaults on private property rights in the nation today. Under civil forfeiture, the government can take away your property, your car, your boat, your cash, regardless of whether or not you are convicted of a crime, and even whether or not you are arrested for a crime. The way civil forfeiture works is the police can pull you over. They can claim, for instance, that you have a suspiciously large amount of cash on you, and the government can take away that cash, say that they suspect that you are a drug dealer or that you are laundering money, even if they don't find any drugs in the car or have any reason to believe that apart from the property that you have in your possession. And then once that property is taken away, the burden then shifts to the property owner to try to get the car or the cash or other property back. So civil forfeiture really turns a fundamental American principle on its head. In civil forfeiture, your property is guilty until you prove it innocent. And that's one of the reasons why these laws have been abused, why people are losing their property, and that is wrong. In America, people should not lose their property without being convicted of a crime. A major problem with civil forfeiture, and something that is in desperate need of reform, is under civil forfeiture laws in 40 states and at the federal level, police and prosecutors are entitled to keep all or most of the property that they seize for their own use. So police and prosecutors can use this to renovate their offices, to buy new equipment, and in places like Texas and Arizona, to even pay their own salaries. This should not happen. People should not be given this direct profit incentive to go out and take as much property as possible. So that is a fundamental reform of civil forfeiture laws that must occur, that police and prosecutors should not profit from these laws, that civil forfeiture revenue should go into the general revenue account of the state, and then elected officials should decide how that money is spent. But even more fundamentally, civil forfeiture should not be happening in this country. In America, people should not lose their property unless they are convicted of a crime. So civil forfeiture should really be abolished. that police and prosecutors should focus on taking the assets of folks that have already been convicted of a crime to make sure people do not profit from illegal activity. But innocent property owners and people who have not been convicted of a crime should not stand to lose their cars, their homes, or their currency.
Every time there's a wrongful conviction, we deconstruct cases and take a look at what the contributors are to the events that happened. And we found that unvalidated forensic evidence or improperly used forensic evidence contributes to about half of those cases. And this is something that was enough of a concern that the National Academy of Sciences recently released a report confirming that problem. One of the major issues across the country is that there hasn't been a unification of the forensic system. The report found, the NAS report found that our crime labs are a very fragmented system. You don't have the same resources in one state as you do in another. You don't have the same machines and tools and technologies in one lab than you might have in another. And there are no national standards for how forensic evidence is practiced and applied. And so you may have a lab conducting fingerprint examinations one way in one town, and the next town over it might be done in a completely different way or to different standards. And criminal justice should be applied equally. The primary recommendation of the NAS report is for the creation of a National Institute of Forensic Science, or NIFS. And the idea is that this institute would be independent, science-focused, and unwed to the current law enforcement system, so that scientists can address the science that needs to be done. One thing that sometimes gets lost is that wrongful convictions are a public safety problem. So it's not just the innocent person who spends years and years in prison suffering needlessly who is the victim in a wrongful conviction. Whenever an innocent person is imprisoned, the true perpetrator remains free and remains free to commit more violent crimes, which is something that we've seen through a review of our exonerees and their cases. And additionally, unvalidated or improper forensic evidence also jeopardizes the good convictions that law enforcement and prosecutors work so hard to obtain. And so by improving the science that underlies the evidence that we're using in court, we'll be able to make our criminal justice system more accurate, more fair, and improve public safety.
No one wants an innocent person in prison, but beyond that, there are the criminal justice expenses that are put into convicting the wrong person. When an innocent suspect is misidentified, police resources are diverted to investigating that person and diverted away from investigating the real perpetrator. So that's a huge waste when we go on even to trial, to the trial level, and then beyond to appeals and post-conviction. We're spending millions of dollars on proving a person innocent when really that money could be spent more wisely on convicting the true perpetrator of the crime. Three of the ones for which we advocate in particular are, at least on the federal level, the reauthorization of the Justice for All Act, including its Innocence Protection Act provisions and the grant programs that it contains. And those grant programs are federal to state money programs where the state recipients have to certify that they have certain schema in place to preserve biological evidence and to and for post-conviction DNA testing access. And we know that clearly if the evidence hadn't been preserved and if the exonerees hadn't been given access to post-conviction DNA testing, that these 266 exonerees, they wouldn't have ever been able to be exonerated. So those are two very critical parts of the Innocence Protection Act, and so we advocate for the reauthorization and reappropriation of these programs. And beyond that, we advocate for the establishment of a federal innocence commission. Also, there's been a recent bill. It will have to be reintroduced this session by Senator Webb, the National Criminal Justice Commission Act. In either case, whether it be this commission or the Federal Innocence Commission, we advocate for this commission to analyze the causes of wrongful convictions and make recommendations to the states for reform. And then finally, when a person who's been wrongfully convicted gets out of prison, there's sometimes no safety net for him. A lot of times, in some states, I think it's around 23 right now, there is a compensation system where the person will be able to be compensated, but we really advocate for federal sort of clarification of tax law that makes sure that that sort of wrongful conviction compensation is not taxed as federal income. Mm-hmm. So those are three of the innocence protection provisions that we're advocating for. There are a few others: eyewitness misidentification reform, the mandatory recording of interrogations, other things like that are also I think would go a long way to preventing and correcting the miscarriage of justice that is a wrongful conviction.